Okay, I think we're ready to get started. Let me welcome everybody to the State of the City. My name is David Jerome and I'm with the Chamber of Commerce. Let me say as a couple of introductory remarks how much I really do enjoy doing these particularly. I think our members always find great profit in getting to hear directly from our policymakers on how they're running the city or the county or the state or otherwise. And this is a great opportunity for us to do just that. So I always find these a great pleasure. One of the things that's interesting though this year versus others is that unlike a live stage, which we've all grown accustomed to, we're now inviting our mayor to be on the digital stage. So I appreciate his willingness to do that because this is new for everybody. But I think it's nonetheless still, with an election year particularly, doubly important that we take stock of what is happening at our city. So this also permits us to have a new format that we haven't tried before, which I think is really an interesting one. The mayor's agreed to make some introductory comments, obviously, but also to take some Q&A, which I think is an outstanding opportunity for our members to have a dialogue with our mayor. In terms of some introductory comments about the mayor, let me just say, first of all, everybody knows him quite well, and it's a real pleasure to have him here. A couple of things I wanted to note is that sometimes it goes unremarked, and I just wanted to make sure we talk about it a little bit today, is the city is actually extraordinarily well run. It has a good budget, it has a good team, it's running quite well despite being in the middle of a global pandemic. And that's not the only tough curveball that's been thrown to the mayor in his tenure. He also had to deal with 3 August, which still is something that we're dealing with as a community. So despite a global pandemic and tragedy such as that, I think it's also interesting to note that I think he was very well equipped to deal with these things. Our mayor has served in Austin as a state representative, and he also, something that doesn't go remarked enough in my opinion either, is an outstanding businessman. He has a long tenure before ever stepping into the breach in politics as a business leader. Some of my board members, for example, worked with him when he was running his companies and still talk about what a great job he did. And I think this is important because the chamber is about business. That's why we're here. And for our 1,400 members, gives me great pleasure to introduce our current mayor and hand the mic over to you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. And thank you, El Paso Chamber of Commerce, for this opportunity to talk about our city today and our accomplishments. Just last month, City Council adopted the 2020-2021 general operating budget for a total of $442 million. That is a $16 million reduction over our previous year's budget. In the midst of financial challenges brought on by COVID-19, the budget was passed with no increase in our tax rate. Please remember that of your tax dollars, 29 cents goes to the city, 46 cents goes to schools, and 25 cents goes to the county, UMC, and El Paso Community College. 52% of the city's revenue is property taxes, and 18% comes from sales taxes. Our tax exemption discounts are $5.6 million for homestead exemptions, $14.8 million for people over 65, and $2.5 million for disabled El Pasoans, totaling $22.9 million in tax exemption credits. Of our budget, 62% is allocated to public safety or police and fire. The police department's budget increased 3.9% or $5.8 million. $5.8 million. 8% of our budget is streets and 6% is allocated to parks. 66,359 potholes were repaired in our last 3 quarters, and 41 of 63 streets were completed for residential paving. I believe the passage of our $413 million public safety bond last November is one of our most important accomplishments. It provides for a police regional command center in our most populous and growing area, the East Side. It provides for a West Side fire and EMS station, for new police and fire headquarters, and improvements at their respective training academies. During my 3 years as mayor, we have focused on areas neglected or forgotten far too long. We have made big investments in the Northeast with the redevelopment of the Cohen site, a recently approved master planned housing development, and we have listened to neighborhoods concerned about isolation and safety, such as the Angora Loop area. I want to personally thank Dr. Sam Morgan for his diligent leadership on behalf of Northeast El Paso. Our East Side had previously continued to grow without proper planning for quality of life and public safety. That has changed. In addition to a newly planned police regional command center, we have completed a multi-field soccer complex and will be opening our largest city park with competitive swimming and our only diving well for local and regional competition. Kudos to Representatives Isabel Salcido and Henry Rivera for their leadership. From 2015 to 2017, we were spending $51 million a year on quality of life and streets. We are now investing $153 million a year, 3 times more, and that equates to over 500 capital projects completed on time and under budget. These capital improvement projects have supported over 45,000 direct and indirect jobs, 387 streets were resurfaced, and 27 were reconstructed. We still have 231 active capital projects totaling over $678 million for streets, quality of life, and public safety. In addition to investing in projects, we have been saving money too. We have refinanced debt with $47 million in savings and placed nearly $20 million in our fund balance savings account. Internal efficiencies from organizational restructuring, improvements in our healthcare plan, and our recycling program have saved $17 million annually. We've also brought in $32 million from the state through efforts of our delegation for technology improvements on our bridges. Before I became mayor, there was no annual budget amount dedicated to streets. We now allocate $10 million annually versus the previous administration's funding of streets through certificates of obligation. We have also obtained $50 million in state tax incentives for our downtown hotels to support private investments. We will finally have hotels for conventions. As mayor, I focused on all areas of El Paso, but due to the pandemic, some projects have slowed or temporarily halted. We received $119 million in CARES Act funding that has been applied to small business grants and loans, food bank support, and homeless housing, among other priorities. From June 13 to June 2017, 2,604 new jobs were created, totaling $512 million in capital investment. Since I became mayor in June 2017, we have added 4,155 new jobs with $808 million in capital investment, $300 million more in the past 3 years. The last 2 years have brought significant challenges for our region. We have dealt with the immigration crisis, for which national media labeled us as ground zero, the August 3rd attack on who we are as a people, a region, and a culture, and now the COVID-19 global pandemic, which is affecting our physical health, our financial health, and our mental health. Until a vaccine is available, we will persevere by stopping the spread with face coverings, social distancing, and proper hygiene. You know, perseverance is part of our historical DNA. As a region, we have been here since 1659, over 360 years, 100 years before the United States was even founded. We are a region of 2.7 million people with an average age of 31. We've been through wars and revolutions and survived and thrived. It has been an honor to represent our community internationally with our first ever trade delegation to Mexico City in January, to represent us nationally in Washington, D.C., and through national and statewide media to remind people we are the 6th largest city in Texas and the 20th largest city in the United States and the largest binational, bicultural, bilingual region in the Western Hemisphere. We are one of the safest cities in the United States, and we have received 2 All-America City Awards designations in the last 3 years. El Paso is not just a regional, national, and international player. We are a leader. Studs Terkel, the late everyman philosopher, said, "Heroes are not giant statues framed against a red sky. They are people who say, this is my community and it is my responsibility to make it better." Thank you again for allowing me the opportunity to be your mayor and to be with you today. David?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We really appreciate those comments. I'm already getting questions in, but I just want to remind the folks that are watching that you can submit your questions through the chat function on the Zoom call. And just with your name or anonymous, we prefer your name, obviously, but please feel free to do that. One question that has come in, Mr. Mayor, and I'm going to try to, it's a little bit long, so I'm just going to try to paraphrase it very quickly. But it basically says that you have a unique position as the mayor in terms of what you get to see. And how would you characterize, it has 2 parts as I'm looking at it, how would you characterize the city that you have led for the last several years during this COVID, especially as you walk? I mean, what would you tell somebody that asked you that? And then the other thing is that what projects do you think are important for us to double down on, as it were, during this time and over the next maybe few months to years? That's the question. So what are your thoughts, Mr. Mayor?
Well, assuming we're talking about our economy and where we are as a city right now, as I alluded to, this pandemic has been very painful, physically and mentally and financially. The governor last week agreed to open up everything to 75%. We're still monitoring the daily numbers. Schools, we need to get kids back in school. But I think the bottom line is, on this economy, we're going to not reopen it once it's reached the point. And I don't think anything's going to change until we have a vaccine. We can stop the spread with face coverings and social distancing and hygiene, but we're not going to end it until there's a vaccine. But by virtue of where our economy is, I think we're not necessarily going to have to reopen it. We're going to have to rebuild it. And some of the things we're working on have to do with our close relationship with the Borderplex Alliance. We relocated our economic development division of the city a year or 2 ago, a couple of years ago, to the same location where the Borderplex Alliance is, so we can be more efficient in economic recruitment and development. I think the resourcing, or whatever the nomenclature is, for bringing things back from China and potentially dealing with not only warehousing and distribution as the Amazon project is. We're working on another one we hope to announce in the next couple of weeks that's just larger than the Amazon, is the manufacturing opportunities that we can bring back from Asia. And I think those are some real opportunities. And frankly, the Borderplex and economic development will tell you we've got more activity right now than we've ever had, irrespective of the pandemic. So those are prospects and visits. And so I'm optimistic, but we've got to get this thing moving ahead as fast as we can.
And you were mentioning Mexico. It is another question has come in on that. when we think of Mexico, what are you seeing? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's our, I refer to us as one region. It's our nearest neighbor. We're the largest U.S. city on the Mexican border. And the relationship with Juarez is critical to our economic development and our future. So it's absolutely critical. We've got those issues with the pandemic on non-essential travel back and forth on the bridges. Mexico just last week said that they were going to extend the non-essential travel ban another 30 days. I assume our side will do the same thing until we get our control on or have a better understanding of where we are on the spread of COVID in Mexico. And primarily in Juarez, we're very tenuous there. I have spoken to Sector Chief Mancha about trying to improve the times on the bridges, which they constricted verifying non-essential travel. And we're working on that, but that's a federal issue, and all I can do is express our concerns on limitations on that. But Mexico is critical to us, David. We are one region, and the expansion of the maquilas is essential. And I think there's a real opportunity with this resourcing coming back from China.
Now, Mr. Mayor, this one might be the hardest question I'm going to ask you. It comes from a young viewer, I'm supposing, so forgive me for this. But they're asking, what's it like to be the mayor every day?
Well, it's an honor and it's a privilege. The challenges have changed on a daily basis. I don't think anybody would have ever expected the last 2 years with what we've gone through. I get called for panels on crisis management, and I made a remark to my spouse, Adair, a couple of weeks ago. I says, I'm not an expert on crisis management. I've just been surviving and doing the best we can. We are a unique community. We are a special community. And my biggest frustration as mayor is the fact that we're such an unknown jewel. And it's taken a lot of these crises to be able to educate people on who we are and what we're about and what makes us special.
Well, I think that should give them some insight. I think that's excellent. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the things is that we have a lot of numbers that you gave us on the running of the city. And I think that probably comes to some extent from your business roots. And the Chamber does work with Borderplex Alliance, Workforce Borderplex, and other organizations in town to try to make sure that not only are we attracting business, but we're trying to help them to grow and be successful in their own right. And what we have currently, that is. And we've been working, I think, very effectively with the city and other organizations this year to try to help during the pandemic, especially, which has obviously wrought such difficulty for small, medium enterprises. But in terms of things that you think that maybe we could have done differently, or things you'd like to see us all maybe accelerate, are there things that for small business that you found especially useful or have heard are especially useful, or things that you think maybe we should rethink?
I'm not sure I follow the question, except let me paraphrase what I think I understand is what can we do to accelerate? We are a community of primarily medium and small sized businesses. That is the bulk of our economy. And we need to do whatever we can for, this pandemic has been crippling. I think that's been the biggest issue, although certain sectors have done well, primarily those online. We're just going to have to make sure we have the capital investments available to be able to sustain the operations of the small, medium-sized businesses that we have here. We only have 2 large corporate headquarters, and we're about to lose. We actually are losing one as via a sale. So we're down to 1 large publicly held corporate headquarters. But we have a lot of, I've said on numerous occasions that I think our greatest asset is our human capital. And, I think we have more value in our human capital here as a region than there is value in oil in the Permian Basin. With UTEP and Texas Tech and the expansions there's some tremendous opportunities. The dental school is about to be completed and have their first class. You know, you've got of course, we've got what's unique about the medical school and the dental school is that they will have bilingual graduates. You can't graduate unless you are bilingual. And I think that's critical for us on the border. UTEP is doing a great job with Dr. Wilson as the new president and the expansion that they're doing. So, you know, that's our future. The economic viability of a community is solely predicated on the education of its workforce. And that's secondary education as well as our graduates opportunities post high school. So I think that's the key to whatever we need to do is going to come back to education. And when you say graduate post high school, I'm not just saying a 4-year college degree. I'm saying you can have a professional certificate. There is critical need for a lot of that around here. So, but that's to me the key foundational point that we need to work on.
Excellent. One other question that has come in since we were answering the last one is that it appears that the El Pasoans are out more on the trails, hiking, biking, and in open space, et cetera. Have we done enough to make open space a priority during this pandemic?
Well, I hope so. I mean, we had some issues related to personnel, and the state was slowed the opening of the state parks because they didn't have the personnel and there was concern on the pandemic. But I think given where we are, and I'm optimistic, although our numbers went up a little bit this morning on the positives, we haven't yet seen the significant spike that we have had with prior holidays. We're still getting the Labor Day numbers. It's 2 weeks today for the Labor Day numbers, but we seem to be holding our own, and I'm in favor of the governor's action last week to open to 75% for non-essential businesses, and the essentials were already open anyway. So, but what we've dedicated the parks, we've dedicated the trails, we've opened them up. We're doing some conservation easements and open. So, I think we've done as much as we can as a community to take advantage of our not only our geography but our climate and what's available outside. But and every development requires parks, et cetera. So we've spent a lot of effort on that. So I'm hopeful we've done enough. But most of it was if there was any limitation, it had to do with the pandemic and personnel.
Yeah, I was always, I think that's always a difficult issue, but I think the city being able to pivot to support healthcare as much as they have has been very important. And I know that money doesn't come from nowhere. So you have to shift it around and something has to slow down. But I thought it was a very good balancing act. One thing that has come in as a question is, it's always interesting to see what's on people's minds and what they want you to comment on, Mr. Mayor. But one is the census. And I do think that is related to quality of life and rather important. Would you like to make a comment or two on the census and how you think about that?
The census is critical for us, absolutely critical, that everyone be counted. There's been that issue related to immigrants. Everyone needs to be counted. The immigrants we have in our community are using our facilities, our streets, our road. We need everyone counted. It is critical to our well-being on a national basis and on a local basis for everyone to be counted. And there's been some misperceptions out there and concerns by, I think, maybe residents about the census information, and it's critical that it be completed and submitted.
Yes, we agree. It's very important that we're counted. So much.
Well, in fact, David, it affects our federal grants and revenue stream, but it also affects our representation at the state level and at the federal level from a congressional standpoint and the state representative level as well. And so I think it's absolutely critical.
Yeah, I was going to just mention that, but I'm glad you did it better than me, Mr. Mayor. I agree. It's a huge issue. One of the other questions that just came in is about projects. And maybe I can help stimulate or just round this out a little bit. The Chamber certainly looks at things like the arena, I-10 widening with a cap is not just good for the community under any circumstance, but also maybe in this time especially is almost stimulus package items that we're lucky to have on the shelf to think about. Are those projects or other projects that you would say on your mind is important for us to consider as we're looking at getting out of COVID and going into next year, let's say post-vaccination if we're lucky? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, transportation is critical. We just signed a letter with Representative Ortega. I'm the chairman of our Metropolitan Planning Organization, and Representative Ortega is the vice chair. The allocations on the state level through the Texas Department of Transportation were not exactly what we would consider supportive of our area. Again, it was going to different parts, primarily what we call the proverbial I-35 corridor. So transportation dollars are important. I-10 is a critical conduit for commerce across the state of Texas. And unfortunately, we have to continue to remind the folks in Austin about how critical it is. And that's what we need to do here. We have the capital improvements. I walked in to complete the quality of life bond election that we did in 2012 with the Multipurpose Special Events Center. You know, the key to that Multipurpose Special Events Center is the fact that as it got caught up in the emotional and political rhetoric of sporting events, the key to those prior to COVID, the revenue streams were coming from concerts. We know two things that we need as a community to attract more conventions, which is outside dollars coming here, is that we do not have enough convention display space in our convention center as it stands now. We really lack somewhere in the neighborhood, I think a study showed me 40,000 square feet. A multipurpose special event center will allow exhibition space to be expanded into that area as well. So we do need that to help from a convention standpoint, from an entertainment venue, and sporting events as well, but it's all part and parcel. We think the litigation is for the most part been finalized, but there's still one case that needs to be responded to by the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals. And then we can proceed hopefully with the verification on the antiquities, archaeological excavation to determine what is there in the way of what needs to be preserved and move forward. And I want to remind me, you know, I walked into that litigation. It was filed in April of 2017 before I was named mayor end of May, as I recall, of 2017. So we've had to deal with that. It's a shame. It's cost the city $1.7 million in legal fees that I think were highly unnecessary, to be an understatement. But we will continue to move ahead. 70% of the voters wanted to move ahead with that. And I think there's a logical argument for that. The fact that we can go, the fact that there was not enough money allocated to do it correctly only opens the door for sponsorships and naming rights and the things that other venues around our state and around our nation have done to make those multi-purpose special event centers more viable and appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think, you know, when we look at those and the situation we're in, we're hoping that no matter where you sit on the political spectrum, people see these projects as a vital economic stimulus for the entire community. And in addition to being, you know, promised quality of life kind of activities. So I agree, it's extremely important. Another question that just came in is an interesting one as well, that the chamber, I know the city and others worry about, before COVID especially, the wage rates. And a lot of work we were doing is to try to coach or bring along companies so that they could, let's say through quality training and other kinds of training, to make them more competitive, enhance, and to give them the ability to enhance their their wages that way. But there's obviously a lot of concern about wage rates that's continuing and maybe accelerating with the with COVID-19's impacts being so manifest. What are your thoughts on wage rates, and where do you see them going perhaps?
Well, I think under the economic development recruitment we're doing through Borderplex and the city, the companies we're looking at have wage rates and packages that are exceptionally competitive and on the top end. You know, it's been interesting. We have what I call the political focus on hourly wages. And if you go back and look at Nashville, which has experienced an unbelievable renaissance, they did away with minimum wage structure. And they found out that it grows exponentially as you expand and attract more. So the focus has not been on X number of dollars per hour, it's been on the growth and the capital investment. What I've been telling people is it's more important for us to have capital investment, which means there's a greater chance of retention and commitment than it is just having some entity come in, lease a space, and hire several hundred people at a rate that's approvable, that we approve. So what we've got with the commitment from Amazon, irrespective of the fact that it's going to be in the Horizon area, we're one region. There's another one we're coming up. We'll be within the city, and we hope to announce in the next 2 weeks. I've been working on a manufacturing operation from Arizona since I became mayor in 2017 that we think is going to relocate, but it's going to relocate to Santa Teresa, which is fine. That the laborers, the jobs will enter to El Paso. We'll provide the labor for those. So it's a regional economy, and we're going to continue to work on it as a regional economy when we attract industry. But I think that what we're seeing is there's a growth in the wage rates, the packages, the support, the ancillary things that, for instance, Amazon talked about in the way of education support and healthcare, et cetera, are all part and parcel of that package.
Excellent, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. An additional question that's come in is one that we find very intriguing as well, is that I think we all know that El Paso, through its entire history, has been a major sort of transportation and commerce hub. And as we think about, let's say, beyond COVID-19 at this point, because I think that's hopefully, maybe more analogous to a natural disaster as opposed to anything else. When we're thinking about the other side of COVID-19, what are the challenges that we have to fulfilling that potential even more? Amazon coming in is a demonstration of, I think, how well the community is doing already in terms of having the people and the assets in place. But as an example, we do think I-10 needs to be expanded. We think the bridges are an unnatural choke point. What are your thoughts on those items as we think about El Paso as a trade and commerce hub?
Well, it boils down to logistics, and that is a critical component for us. It's a real strength for us, and we need to invest in it and expand it as best we can. The bridges are a challenge. We've been talking about for the last 2 years on things we can do to improve the transfer of cargo and expedite it in a more efficient manner. That takes work on our side from a federal standpoint and the Mexican side from a federal standpoint. We've looked at different things. The immigration limitations really affected us when they removed staffing from the bridges. My big request of our federal government and CBP, Customs and Border Protection, for the bridges is more staffing. We still don't have the fully staffed component that we need from a manning table standpoint, and haven't had for many years. So the city has a public-private partnership that we've had for a number of years with the federal government through CBP to staff. We pay somewhere in the neighborhood, I think, of 1.2 or 1.4 million a year in overtime to staff for overtime payments to CBP to staff the bridges at peak periods. During the immigration crisis, when when they had removed staffing from the bridges to work the border from for immigration control, we even offered to pay more. And they said, we can't take it. We don't have the personnel to do it. So we've got some real issues at a federal level that our congressional delegation and for the state of Texas and our regional congresswoman need to work on for staffing there at the bridges to improve the times and logistics there. Plus the fact that we continue to need to work on our infrastructure internally. But the investments that are coming in, if you've seen lately from the private sector coming in from out of town to set up office warehouse distribution operations on almost a spec basis, show that they understand where we are and the key component we are for, we are truly the gateway to Mexico, unlike unfortunately, others have tried to market that a little bit better than we have, but we really are. We're the largest U.S. city on the Mexican border. And as I've explained to people, you can stand on the top of one of our bank buildings and look south, and you can't tell where El Paso ends and Mexico begins.
I think that's exactly right. It's always good for folks to remember that El Paso is next to the 15th largest economy on the planet, that being Mexico. And that is a huge attraction if we think about ourselves as a trade, sort of commerce, even a port city. I think that's a very interesting frame to have when we look at emerging sectors and things of this sort, which clearly Amazon and others are doing, as you point out. And but I think a lot has been done on education to also make it that we have an employee base that's young and trained for these things. So,
as I alluded to earlier, David, the biggest challenge we have is that we're still an unknown jewel.
Yeah.
These tragedies allowed us to, these crises, I should say, allowed me to kind of educate others about who we are.
Yeah.
We went after the Amazon headquarters back in 2017.
That's right. Yeah.
Not that I thought we had a real chance there, but by the same token, when they talked about their parameters of having an expansion of 50,000, we had done that with the expansion in BRAC at Fort Bliss. Mm-hmm. And we planned for it, we handled it, we made sure we had the education component available for teachers, the medical component available. We handled everything. So I don't know of any other community in the United States that had in recent times had a 50,000 increase in people, more or less, with the dependents as well. And Fort Bliss is our largest employer and always will be. So, but we had done that, but it kind of, the purpose was to make people aware of who we are and what the attributes are and the assets we have here that seem to be unknown.
Yeah,
we're not fully realized.
Obviously there's traction there because of the growth we're seeing, and it's gratifying to see, especially now, more needed perhaps than ever. One other question that comes up though in that vein is the idea of what are we doing to protect the downtown. We were discussing a bit there. I'm trying to read this as fast as I can, but it looks like a question about maintaining density in El Paso's core. Now, clearly, it's hard to be a city if the downtown suffers, but it sort of dissipates, and we've seen this repeatedly throughout the United States. But we have a lot of growth throughout the city in different areas, especially on the east side. How do you feel about this question in terms of downtown and the expansion question, the tension?
Well, the city over the last several years has put over, when we look at the private and public investments, over $300 million in our downtown. I mean, you can go back to starting with the San Francisco Plaza, the Plaza Hotel, the Paso del Norte Hotel, which we needed for convention. We had no hotels available for conventions. We've had to turn conventions down that could be revenue drivers for our community. We didn't have when we didn't even have restrooms down there. We just put restrooms in down there within the last year for our downtown. The downtown is important, is critically important to our growth as a city. And we've been investing in that, and people have talked about it. The COVID pandemic is going to slow some of the opportunities we had. We're not going to be able to do our Winterfest this year that we've been doing has been attracting thousands and thousands downtown. But we have several projects that we have participated in from an incentive that will also provide residential housing to our downtown. So we start with that, then we get other amenities down there, down in our downtown to attract. So when we have conventions, people will start at our downtown and it'll grow from there. And that's what we need to continue to do. So the key is the hotels, the attracting the conventions, and then the expansion of the things we've been doing downtown. I mean, it's night and day from what it used to be, and the viability and the opportunities are tremendous. And every great community talks about their downtown, their city center, and that's what we're working on.
Well, Mr. Mayor, related to that, I have a question on tourism I'll ask you in just one second, but I'm also aware that there is a very steady stream of questions, and I'm also mindful of your time. I'd like to maybe make these the last two questions if you're in agreement. VJ, I'm going to hand it over to you after this question to ask the last one and do the wrap up if you don't mind. But Mr. Mayor, the second to last question that you have today then is about tourism. And I know that tourism operates, you know, on terms of thoughts of trying to get folks to come to El Paso from the rest of the United States, but often people don't take into account the huge impact. I know it's non-essential usually, so it suffers during COVID, but the huge impact that Mexico has on El Paso's tourism as well. And you were mentioning Winterfest, for example, earlier. What are your thoughts on promoting El Paso as a tourist destination, whether it be to the rest of the United States or Mexico?
The last I looked at, our tourism dollar is, from an historical standpoint, is like 2% or 3%. I mean, it's very low. We have the ability to have tremendous tourism come here, but by the same token, we don't really have any resorts. We were working on one resort that was truncated and ended because of the COVID. We thought we might have a destination resort, but the conventions and the hotels will be a starting point. You've got to have some place to go. You've got to have some place to stay, and the downtown driver for conventions will be there. We have plenty of hotel space throughout our city for others, but we're going to have to market what's unique about us. And there are a number of things that are truly unique about us, not the least of which is the fact that you know, we're right here on the Mexican border, which attracts others. I look forward to the time post-COVID when we can get our streetcar back operating. We've talked about ultimately in a long-term dream to have that streetcar going back and forth to Juarez. The first step beyond our downtown will be probably towards the medical center area with Texas Tech. But again, we're hamstrung on this pandemic and capital investment. So there are a lot of opportunities for us, and we need to promote. We're a unique area, and it's imperative we do this.
Well, as always, Mr. Mayor, thank you so much. VJ, would you like to ask the last question and maybe do the wrap up?
Sure, absolutely. Mayor Margo, thank you for your governance and your passion for the city of El Paso, and we're very pleased that we could still have a state of the city in these circumstances. We look forward to next year when we can be together in this event and get it back on track as a great event in the city. Many of our membership, high percentage, works with the city, and as a business organization that seeks to grow and retain business, we collaborate greatly with the city and appreciate the partnership. It's been a great year of partnering with the city and the chamber. The All-American City designation, that's a big deal and a repeat on that. And so we know many city departments were involved in that and did a great job to get us there and across that finish line. Can you point to examples of leadership within those city business units that you would hold up as strong and strategic, and maybe even some specific leaders that have risen to the occasion this year. That's one half of the question. The other half is, what have you learned from the resilience of city employees this year in 2020 under the circumstances?
Well, I want to remind everybody, mayor and council have two hires under our city charter, our city manager and our city attorney. Everything operationally emanates under the auspices and guidance and control of our city manager. I think Tommy Gonzalez has a tremendous team. We've moved people around, we've eliminated some positions, we've expanded. You take his city managers. Sam Rodriguez is not only heading capital projects, but also the airport. Ellen Smythe is now handling not only the garbage waste, solid waste, but also she's moving over to Sun Metro. She's running Sun Metro as well. We've got Philip Edaway running the permitting process, the city permitting process, which is critical key to chamber members who do business with the city. We've got, I Tracy Jerome, I'll mention her. She's parks, and she's been involved with the MCAD, the museums and cultural affairs. And then we've elevated Ben Fife. I mean, there are so many different people. Kerry Weston is our deputy city manager. They've all done a great job given this pandemic and the operational hump. We haven't missed a beat. We've had to do some furloughing and some reductions in staff because of the budget crisis. And Robert, I can't leave off Robert Cortines. He's the brains behind the money and the allocation and the financial oversight, and has done a heck of a job on that. I mean, we were proactive in realizing that this pandemic would have a negative effect on our financials. We projected what that would do and took action immediately. And so I think that the leadership under the what I would call the chief executive officer of the city, Tommy Gonzalez, I think has done a heck of a job. And that's where we are, dealing with the variety of challenges we've had over the last 2 years. I mean, when we were doing the immigration crisis, we had to as a city, work with our NGOs, primarily the Annunciation House, to work out transportation issues. Our Emergency Operations Center under Mario D'Agostino was actively involved, and Jorge Rodriguez with our immigration crisis and marshaling resources for humanitarian purposes. And then with COVID pandemic, that they're the primarily keys with Dr. Ocaranza, who's our primary public health authority for this pandemic. So everybody's been working together. We have a 4 o'clock call every day on the pandemic to talk about where we are and what's needed and where we are on hospitalizations and concerns there. But I just, the chamber needs to be aware that I believe the city is in good hands. We're doing the best we can given our challenges, both financially and externally with the pandemic and the previous ones. But you take Chief Allen and the police department. We're still one of the safest cities in the nation, irrespective of what we've gone through. It's just I'm honored and pleased to work with them as we move our city forward.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, we're gonna wrap it up with that, and really appreciate your time. Want to thank everybody for attending. It was a huge response and turnout. Really want to make sure we recognize Workforce Solutions, Borderplex, the Union Pacific, and then all of our star sponsors. And actually, I'd like to ask Nora if you would post that star sponsor for this event list again as we close the call out, and just for a minute as everybody's signing off can read that again. But we really, really thank all of you as star sponsors for this event and helping us put this together. Mayor Margo, on behalf of the El Paso Chamber Board of Directors and our membership, we're very grateful for your time today. We're very grateful for your leadership, as David pointed out, through last August in that situation, and through this pandemic. And then as a chamber, we're very grateful for your leadership with respect to the business rebuild that we're all commencing with. And so with that, we'll go ahead and sign out. But thank you very much again, Mayor Margo, and everybody who attended.
Thank you. And one thing I want to add,
Yes.
just real quick, I know that Judge Samaniego, I think, follows me in the next presentation later on this week or whenever. You know, we work very closely together. And I'm told as a county judge and mayor in El Paso, this is the first time in over 20 years we've had such a close working relationship, and it's critical. And I applaud Judge Samaniego, and all of our health orders are directly in parallel. We'll work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, thank
you
you very much, and to the council as well, and to your city team. You guys are doing a great job, and we'll make sure that we note your kind words about the judge when we speak to him next. Our next event, by the way, just for everybody, is on the 23rd at 9 a.m., where we do the State of Congress, and then the judge follows after that. But thank you again, and have a wonderful day. Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.